So you're developing a Unity game and you would like to make it look a little cooler, smoother, more distorted, funnier, whatever you want, you can do that with post-processing. So that's what we're going to cover in this video. We're going to see all the different types of post-processing that there are and how we can use them in Unity. All right, so let's get started. And by the way, this is Unity Monday, so if you're interested in Unity, definitely check out our content every Monday. Please don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Alright, so what is post-processing? Well, the definition is that it is a method or technique that helps us to enhance the quality of images, videos, films, video games, and so forth. Generally, post-processing applies full-screen filters and effects to a camera's image. You can see that there are different types of uses for post-processing, but what's more interesting is the list of different post-processing effects in Unity, which we are going to apply. And by the way, if you want to follow along in text form, you can of course open up our blog. I'm going to add the link to this particular article in the description below, and you can follow along step by step with all the links and the code and so forth. So as you can see, there are a bunch of different post-processing effects in Unity, and we're going to look at them one by one, and therefore we of course need to start to create a Unity project, or you can of course use the projects that you already have. All right, so let's get started. Therefore, we're going to create a new project, and I'm going to use 3D with extras. This is going to be the post-processing demo, and then you can click create. For this example, I would like to use a specific asset. Therefore, I'm going to go to the asset store, and there I'm going to search for RPG FPS game assets, and there I'm just going to look for the free ones, and I'm going to use this RPG FPS game assets, this one right here. So let's just download it and add it to the project. So if you want to follow along, of course. Once the download is done, you can press import to import the project. So I'm just going to import everything. So click import here again. And then I have this folder here, this RPG FPS game folder, and map v1 is the scene that I want to go to. So you can see that it generates this scene for me, and the shadows aren't perfect, and overall we're going to definitely see how we can improve the overall look and feel of our game by using post-processing. So let's first of all add a camera. I'm going to position it at -10, 5, 0. And the rotation should be 125 for the Y value. So this is the camera preview. If you look at the game, so this is the angle that we have, and this is the game that we're looking at. We can also see that it asks us to rebake the game. A caution culling data is out of date, as well as overall we can make it look a little better by rebaking. So let's go and rebake it. Therefore we go to Window, Rendering, and then Lighting Settings. And then you can see here, Generate Lighting. So I auto-generate the lighting, and as you can see, it's a lot sharper now. It looks quite different to before, so the edges are not as blurry anymore, so it's rebaked now. And by the way, in case it's not going as intended, so for example, if you move the camera around and you can see that this is not looking sharp, or there are some weird distortions or anything like that, what you can do is in the lighting in scene, you can also play around with the light mapper. So here you can use the progressive GPU preview, for example, then it will rebake it. This will take a little time, or a couple of seconds, or maybe even minutes, depending on the hardware that you have, and then it will rebake it, and then it should look sharper. So just play around with this setting, this progressive CPU light mapper or GPU, depending on which ones work for you. All right, I'm going to go back to the Enlighten deprecated, even though it's deprecated, but it's a lot quicker in my case, so I'm going to use this one for now. But as I said, just play around with the light mapper to find the right solution for you, and probably the progressive GPU one will be the best one for you. All right, now how do we apply post-processing effects to it? Well, therefore, you can go to Component, Rendering, and here you find Post-Process Layer, Volume, and Debug. Post-process volume is a special type of volume that can be added to a scene. These volumes are post-processing parameters that we can manipulate, and then the layer, this post-process layer, will apply on the scene camera for full screen effects. All right, so let's go to our camera, and then in the inspector, let's add a new component. So here I'm going to search for post, and you can see post-process layer. That's the one that we're going to use here. Now let's reduce the camera part here so that we get to the post-process layer straight away. You can see this is the settings that we can change for our post-process layer component. All right, so in that layer, let's select post-processing. And then we can play around with the mode. So no anti-aliasing, then fast approximate, anti-aliasing, and so forth. So there are different options that you have here. FXAA was created by NVIDIA, and it's probably the best anti-aliasing method for low-end PCs, so it's pretty good for us. Anti-aliasing is a software technique for a decreased staircase effect, or jaggies. All right, now let's go ahead and add a post-processing volume. Therefore, I'm going to create a new empty object, which I'm going to call post-processing volume. By the way, if you like what you're learning and you would like to know a lot more about Unity and build a bunch of games along the way while learning to develop in Unity, well, then check out my complete Unity course. You can find the link in the description. You are going to learn how to create a zigzag clone with a procedurally created map, how to create a Fruit Ninja clone, how to build a construction game, where you can just build your own city from scratch. You can see here you have even loading and saving of the game. Then you're going to see how to create a Minesweeper clone, as well as a Bit Blaster clone, and a bunch more. So I hope to see you in this course. Check out the link in the description to get a discount. And I'm going to add the component of post-process volume. Here you have a bunch of options. Is global, for example, is if you want it to apply to every layer, so this post-processing that you're applying. The weight is set to 1, the priority sets the priority between more than one volume, and the profile, well, means which effects we want to use in this volume. So now let's go ahead and create a new profile. So I'm just going to click on new, and that will create a new profile for me. It's this one, this map v1 profiles. It's this one, map v1 profiles, and it created this post-processing volume. Well, now what you can go ahead and do is, of course, add some effects. So here at the bottom, you can just click on Add Effect, Unity, and you can select the different effects that there are. So quite convenient, isn't it? I'm going to start with Ambient Occlusion. And then I'm going to turn it on and change the mode to Scalable Ambient Obscurance. Play around with the intensity. You can play around with that as well as the radius. So here, find a way that it looks as you like it. I'm going to set the quality to Ultra and the color to black. So if you go to the game now and you turn on Is Global, you can see that now your ambient occlusion is being applied. So that's pretty nice. As you can see here, this is already an effect that you have added, and it looks significantly better in my opinion. So here you can really play around with the values. So how dark do you want it to be? How dark do you want the shadows to be? How huge do you want the intensity to be? As you can see, at one point it's not looking that good anymore. So you can really play around with that. All right, now let's look at post-processing debug. Therefore, I'm going to select my camera, and then I'm adding the component post-process debug. And now you can play around with the debug overlay. So here I'm going to turn on ambient occlusion, and you can see this is the ambient occlusion where it is going to be applied, and that's pretty much helping us to understand the post-process effect a little better by debugging it. Okay, so you can see it here in the game mode, and now of course by playing around with the value you can see the occlusion even better. So you can really focus on the ambient occlusion or on the effect, on the post-processing effect, rather than on whatever is drawn, instead of whatever else is drawn on the screen. So really focusing on post-processing here. All right. Let's go back to our camera and set the debug overlay to none. So we're back to the original mode. And now let's play around with some other effects. So instead of using ambient occlusion, I would like to use auto exposure. So the auto exposure effect adjusts the exposure of an image according to the range of the brightness level. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add the effect here, auto exposure, deactivating the ambient occlusion, going to turn it on, and now we can play around with the values here. As you can see, I can make it significantly brighter or darker by playing with those values. Okay, so if you want to expose a little bit, so this would be a pretty cool effect if you want to have some sort of a waking up after having been hit on the head, well, the player, not you yourself, then you could play around with the auto exposure so that it looks slightly differently, and it creates this kind of effect real quick, where the person then starts to see again after being in the dark for so long, after being hit on the head or whatever. All right, now let's look at the bloom effect. So here I'm going to add the bloom effect and I'm going to play around with that. Let's turn it on for now and then set the intensity to, let's say 2, the threshold to something like 0.5. You can even see here, if it's at 0, this is how the bloom effect is going to look like. Then if you want to add a little bit of diffusion to it, you can see, yeah, basically you can just play around with the different settings that you have here and make it look as you like. Now, if you want to have a dirt in your screen, so like a dirty lens of the camera, for example, you can add some dirtiness. So you can add a texture here, which will generate a dirtiness. Therefore, you can download this lens dirt to PNG from Jimmy Jam, and it's pretty cool. I'm going to use this one. You can see this is the dirty lens that I want to have. So I'm just going to download this file and then drag it into my project. So into my assets. I'm just going to drag it into the assets directly. I'm too lazy to create an extra folder for this, and then I'm going to drag it in here. But usually you would drag it into an extra folder that you create just for that. And now let's play around with the intensity. So let's make this a little more intense. And then we need to turn on some more settings. So I'm going to play around with those values a little bit. Well, you can see you can barely see it. Let's increase the intensity. We can still barely see it. Well, what you can do is you can add diffusion. So here, and play around with the anamorphic ratio here. And you can see this is the effect that we get from our lens. So here, this dirty lens kind of effect. You can really play around with it. Okay, so just find whatever works for you, whatever creates the right effect in your opinion. By the way, if you don't want it to be that bright, you can deactivate auto exposure. This will generate this effect in a slightly better way, let's say. So yeah, basically just play around with the values as you like. All right, let's add the next effect. So we had bloom. Now let's go ahead and add the chromatic aberration. This creates this effect where you are, for example, looking through a lens and you are speeding up. So in some games, this is how you would generate a speeding up effect. And you might wonder what this LUT stands for. LUT stands for a lookup table, which is a mathematically precise way of taking specific RGB image values from a source image and modifying them to new RGB values by changing the hue, saturation, and brightness values of the source image. All right, so again, you can, of course, find the link to this page in my article. And therefore, you can find the link in the description. I'm just going to download this blue-red TGA file, and I'm going to drag it into my folder. So directly over here. And now we can go to the processing. And now we can drag it into the textures here for the spectral LUT, for the LUT. And you can see it generates this effect. It's slightly differently. Turn it off, turn it on. You can see it is a specific blue to red transformation. And yeah, you can just use different kind of LUTs from the link as you have seen. All right, now let's look at color grading. So I'm going to add color grading here. Open it up a little bit. You can see there's a bunch of stuff that you can play around with. So for example, this post exposure adjusts the overall exposure of the scene in EV units. This is applied after HDR effects and right before tone mapping. So it won't affect previous effects in the chain. Then we can play around with the temperature. So here with the color, we can add a color filter, the saturation, contrast, all the good stuff. So you can really play around with the hue shift here. You can create pretty cool effects, as you can see. You can make it purple, or you can make it this orange reddish color kind of thing. Reduce the saturation. So if you want to have a gray effect or a white and gray type of game, then you can play around with that. Change the contrast if it's a very weird kind of day. So a bunch of cool little options that you have here. You can even play around with the channel mixer if you really want to change the RGB values that are in there. So let me bring the saturation back to normal, and then you can see it even better. So you can reduce the red element, so you can really play around as you like. And that's generally what I would recommend you do. You just should install all of that on your machine, test it, and see how it looks and what you like of that and what you want to use. So depth of field, let's look at that now. The depth of field is a post-processing effect that adjusts the focus point of the camera. In reality, the camera can only focus on an object at a specific distance. So if you want to add more depth effects, well, this depth of field is pretty cool. So you can really, let me add the aperture, focal length, and maximum blur size. So you can create quite a big blur here. So this would be something that you could use if it's super hot. It's a very hot day. You can barely see anywhere. Yeah, you can really just play around with those values here. Pretty damn blurry here, I'd say. I can barely see anything. So if you want to create an effect in a game where the player barely sees anything because he usually wears glasses and he lost his glasses, well, that's how you can play around with it, by using the depth of field. Now let's look at the grain effect. So I want it to be colored. I want to have a certain intensity. You can see this is the grain effect. So let's increase the size a little bit of this grain effect, and then the intensity again. So you can see if you really want to have a grain effect, well, that's how you would do it. Then the next one will be the lens distortion. So in photography, distortion is generally referred to as an optical aberration that deforms and bends physical straight lines and makes them appear curvy in images. So lens distortion will allow you to create some sort of a fisheye effect, or maybe even a sniper scope zoom effect. So yeah, just play around with those values. Once again, let me just add a little bit of a value here. So yeah, you can see a fish lens effect that you can create. So either you want, well, if it's 1-1, you can see it's equally in both directions, so X and Y multiplication. But if you just want to have an effect towards the Y direction, you could just use a Y multiplier but no X multiplier. So you could really stretch things out towards the middle, and you can play around with the center position as well. So let me change the center position. You can see all kinds of weird effects that you can generate here with the lens distortion, which is pretty cool. I really like this effect. And you can even zoom in, wow, or scale out. So if you zoom out, well, that's pretty funny. Yeah, so play around with those. And at this point, I think we can even make a drinking game out of it. Each time that I'm saying just play around with this or with those, drinking a shot, well, you wouldn't make it through the video up to the end, I guess. Okay, so now let's look at motion blur. So this effect blurs an image when game objects are moving faster than the camera's exposure time. So there aren't many things moving in our game, so it's really difficult to check this effect. That's basically what you can achieve with motion blur. All right, then the next effect, screen space reflections. This is something that you can see here. So this is a screen space reflection. I can't really show it in our specific example that you see there, but that's the effect that you can have, for example, on wet floors, or in this case on glass of a car and so forth. And now let's finally look at vignettes. So this is the last effect that we have here that we can choose from as of now. And the vignette effect darkens the edges of an image so the center part of the image looks brighter. So let's go to game mode and play around with the intensity here. You can see you can even focus on a specific field. On the center, for example, you can play around with the smoothness here. Make it smoother and rounder, less round. So let's make it less round and go full intensity. You can see now we have this movie kind of effect. So if you only want to see a portion of the game, you could play around with a vignette. All right, so now you know how to use post-processing in Unity, the different effects that you can apply with it, and now you can use it for your own games and make your games look even better. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something from it. If you did, then please leave a like and hit that subscribe button. And while you're at it, hit also this notification bell so that you get notified about all the good stuff that we're uploading. Also, leave a comment. If you have any type of questions, if you have anything that you would like to know, any suggestions for future content that we should create and so forth, then please leave a comment. All right, have a nice day and see you in one of those 2 videos.